Hi, I'm Siobhan Golden, Technical Artistic Director at the Tony & Guy Academy and Label M Professional. Here we are at the Work Studio, shooting our new 2016 collection, Socialised. For Socialised, Daniele De Angelis and I are working on our look, The Icon. The Icon is a saturated retro red colour. The use of microlights within the Icon colour application is to create an intensity that is very subtle but adds a 3D dimension to the shape. Ultimately, we wanted to see a bright, intense red reflect, and also added a saturated, deeper root area to give the illusion of lighting and a silhouette. The face behind the inspiration for the Icon is model Natalie Westling, who rocked the retro red at a Marc Jacobs campaign. From there, Natalie Westling's iconic red hair brought her all over New York Fashion Week and into different designers' advertorials and campaigns. Along with Natalie Westling, Prada's third chapter of their Iconoclast exhibition was advertised with a short, intense red-haired model that reflects the experimental and individual aspect of their collections. So now we've had a look at the behind the scenes for Socialised, let's go back to the studio and check out the step-by-step for the Icon colour application. The sectioning pattern for the Icon started with a profile and radial parting. From there, I worked a diamond section around the top crown, and then using the 2 points of the diamond, used 2 horizontal sections out to the recession points. This created 2 further sections in the fringe area. In preparation for creating the intensity of the Icon colour palette, we worked a pre-lightener base globally to create an even blonde. From there, I applied a very soft rosy toner to act as a pre-colour and allow my saturated red to sit heavily on top. Starting the colour application for the Icon on the front hairline, I'm using the angle of my brush to feather my retro red onto the fine baby hairs along that hairline. From there, I've outlined the section and then work diagonal backs internally to apply my product to all of the roots. Working through the back section, I'm applying my retro red in the same method, outlining the section first, and then working finer sections internally to apply my retro red onto the roots. Work with slicers and work from the crown to the nape, applying retro red to all of the roots. Moving on to the opposite side, I'm applying my retro red again onto the hairline. I outline the section and work internally to apply my retro red to the root area. Finally, working in the back quarter, applying a small amount of product to the mesh first, I then over direct the hair over the top. This helps the hair adhere to the mesh and makes sure we get an even saturation of colour throughout. By colour blocking the perimeter, we create intensity and strength. Now moving on to the front right-hand section, I'm applying retro red to all of the roots. Again, I'm starting my application on the hairline, using the angle of the tint brush in a gentle feathering technique to ensure no product comes into contact with the skin. After applying the hairline, I apply the retro red to outline the section, and then taking vertical sections internally, applying it to all of the roots. Now I'm going to go in and start my microlights technique. The first fine section that I take, I over-direct onto a mesh and apply the retro red through the lengths and ends. Directly behind it, an ultra-fine slice is taken, over-directed onto the mesh, and the illuminator is applied through the mid-lengths and ends and blushed in towards the roots. I loop the mesh over to protect the colour within it. The next section is taken directly parallel behind it, over-directed onto a mesh, and the retro red is applied through the lengths and ends. This application of alternating between the retro red and the illuminator is repeated the whole way through the section. The illuminator is used within the microlights technique to create a subtle glow behind each retro red section. This intensifies the overall result. This method of alternating between retro red and illuminator is continued the whole way through that section. Now moving on to the opposite side, starting with my retro red colour application on the hairline, then working diagonally within the section to apply all of the roots. Now the root application is complete, I'm going to start the microlights technique, taking a fine slice onto a mesh, starting with my retro red and applying it through the mid-lengths and ends. I take a parallel section to the previous. I'm going to apply my illuminator to the lengths and ends first and then blush it into that root area. Parallel to the previous, applying the retro red through the lengths and ends. I'm continuing this application until the section is complete. Both sections of microlights are complete. I'm going to move on to the diamond at the top of the crown. The idea with the diamond in the crown area is to create a saturated shadow that gently veils over the fringe area. To achieve this silhouette of depth at the root area, I apply a vintage red to all of the roots. I use the square of my tint brush to apply vintage red to the outline of the section. Now that I've completed all of the roots, I'm going to go back to where I began the sectioning pattern and over-direct a diagonal slice onto a mesh. I slightly elongate the vintage red at the root area and blush this with my retro red through the lengths and ends. I continue this method, taking parallel diagonal slices and over-directing to the previous. Ultimately, the size of the vintage red on the roots will remain the same, but we can use the previous section as the guide. I elongate the vintage red at the root area, and then using my retro red on the lengths and ends first, I merge up towards that root area using the angle of the brush to blush the two tones together. By blushing the two tones in together, we create a very seamless finish. I'm not separating each section with mesh because I want to ensure a saturated colour application through those lengths and ends. I'm now working on my final diagonal section, over-directing it to the previous, again gently elongating the vintage red, working my retro red through the lengths and ends, and then gently blushing the two tones in together. The colour application for the icon is now complete. Key points is looking at that saturation of root colour at the crown, creating that silhouette of depth, veiling over that internal intensity. The microlights application is a really crucial part of the technique. By using the illuminator, this is what enhances the intensity of the red throughout that focal point of the fringe. Our icon gal is a non-conformist individual. She wears her attitude with a directional colour. A raw retro red with micro slices of varying tonalities creates an intense result. The icon colour, cut and styling is now complete, and you can see the end result is beautiful, intense and healthy looking. We've just finished shooting Socialised and our look the icon. Socialised has been a really exciting collection to work on. It's very trend driven, lots of inspiration from models of the moment with strong directional colours. It's been really exciting working with Daniele on such a creative project. To achieve the icon, we've talked lots, communicated, and ultimately created something that we're both very proud of. This is my finished look, the icon for Socialised.